Truly, there are many characters among the Dota 2 rosters that can be learned and played. Some of them tend to be more viable and highly rated throughout the many patches, consistently placing themselves at the top of the pack. One of such heroes happened to be none other than Visage. Visage almost always hold a high win rate, regardless of the patch currently being played. I went through a spam-oriented training regiment for about 40 games, and can happily proclaim that, yes, indeed, Visage is on fire in 735 too. So let's delve into why you should consider bringing him up under your wing as an either offlane or support player. If you like videos such as this, I'd hugely appreciate a thumbs up and a follow. I work hard at putting out mostly educational content, and your help and interest is what makes that possible. So why exactly is it that Visage is as strong as he is right now? The easy answer to that is that he's almost gained nothing but buffs in the majority of patches for quite a while now. His numbers keep getting increased, various things about him get modified to his advantage, with the newest one being how soul assumption is calculated. Also recently becoming a universal hero, which does so much for his damage. As such, Visage finds himself in a spot where he doesn't exactly have a lot of downsides going for him either. He's extremely strong right at level 1, being one of the most terrifying laners to face due to his burst damage. Turns into a much more terrifying monster as he acquires his familiars, and becomes a pushing and killing machine with items such as Orchid or Aghanim's, turning him into an invisible flying terror. Because of this, he fits into just about any lineup. He ramps up in damage a lot better than he used to in years prior, so the hero isn't on a critical death push timer like he used to, meaning he works in more greedy lineups as well. On the other hand, if he does find himself in a very push and tempo style composition, he can melt structures as arguably the fastest hero in the game right now. What we're left with here is a hero that does a lot of everything, and is extremely good at it too. Meaning that picking Visage isn't even a greedy or selfish thing to do either, but rather a hero that's overall just solid in any team, and can play around any composition as needed. Surprisingly, one would think that Visage's skill build is a difficult one, but that actually couldn't be further from the truth. In just about every game you go almost the same build or a very similar one to that. To start off with, you want to pretty much always get a hold of Soul Assumption at level 1. The ability is busted in every sense of the word, and it's the main way we're going to set up for First Blood either through rune fighting in the beginning, or by harassing an early laning stage. After this, depending on the lane we're on, we want to skill either into Gravekeeper's Cloak or Grave Chill. If you find yourself on a lane where you can't really get kills easily and take a lot of punishment from right clicks, either because it's a hard matchup or your lane partner doesn't offer you any opportunities, getting Gravekeepers is the better choice. If you do find yourself able to set up kills however, getting Grave Chill over it is significantly better, since it will debuff the enemy, make you faster and able to set up kills that much easier, while also slip away from harm. Ultimately, by level 4, we want to have at least 1 point in every skill Visage has, and his build is completely on rails and easy after this. We max out Grave Chill first, because it's what will yield the most damage due to the ability of debuffing enemies, buffing Visage and his familiars on top of increasing farming speed significantly with its use, followed by Gravekeeper's Cloak for protection as we start playing offensively, and lastly, maxing Soul Assumption to increase our burst damage potential by spamming it in teamfights. Familiars are of course leveled every time they're available. Of note is that you have to resummon them for their increased damage benefit at 12 and 18 respectively. His talents are all good, and you can effectively match and pair them as you please. The ones I would recommend for the average pub games however are +6 Visage and familiar attack damage at 10, the most important one, Soul Assumption hits +2 targets at 15, +25 Soul Assumption damage per charge at 20, and lastly, +1 familiar at level 25. With his skill build cleaned up somewhat, let's look at the item build I would recommend on average for your Visage games. Of mention here is that there are generally 2 routes Visage can deviate down towards. One that's focused on early pushing and closing games off quickly, preferably pre-25 to 30 minutes, and one that's more detailed around a potentially longer game. I mostly don't mention start items on most heroes, since they vary greatly from character to character and are up to the individual. But for Visage, you really want to start with these items in particular because he's a universal hero. 3 branches, 2 of which will be turned into a magic wand, 2 circlets, of which 1 or 2 can be turned into either a bracer or wristband depending on need, and a set of tangos. Do this in every game with Visage. Your right click damage soars through the sky and enables a stupidly aggressive playstyle on lane. While building towards your stat items of choice and your wand, you then want to also pick up a pair of brown boots, which will later be turned into tranquils. The first item we're going for on Visage is none other than Vladimir's Offering. This is a must in every game, since it simply offers too much damage for Visage and his birds, while also making it easier keeping his familiars healthy. Doubly so also fueling his ability to buff his teammates in pushes and ganks alike. Follow this up by upgrading it to triangles from your brown boots. This is where the build then completely deviates, depending on what you need to do in the game. So let's move over to two different ways to approach it. If you're aiming for a quick victory and your team is able to supplement that, you want to head towards drums of endurance and orchid fast. Drums seriously fuels Visage offensive capabilities to a degree that's not even funny, and it can thereafter be further transformed into boots of bearing, which is one of the best in-slot items for Visage. Orchid is the aggressive choice, letting you set up kills much easier with Visage. While achieving less building damage is a downside, go for it over drums if you want to have a bit more killing potential. From here, you can do just about anything with Visage. Assault Cuirass, Aghanim Scepter, Shiva's Guard are some of the best luxury items to go for in a game if it hasn't ended early yet. Path number 2 deviates completely from this, and focuses much more on control and setting up for a potentially longer game, with much less focus on direct death pushing with Visage. In order to achieve this, after acquiring Vladimir's and Tranquils, we jump over both drums and Orchid in favor of his Aghanim Scepter. Visage is a universal hero now, so he gets a lot of damage from acquiring it, due to the item's stat-heavy nature, and once acquired, you can almost permanently turn invisible, fly around the map and set up ganks and pushes with him. This puts the enemy in a very uncomfortable position, because you can strike from almost anywhere, and since you aren't focusing on towers as much like this, they rarely know exactly where you even are. The build then edges into the same items as the former one. Orchid for kill potential, drums if you need more burst attack speed for your birds and team, with the same luxury items coming next. I consider neither build better than the other, since it's entirely depending on the match you find yourself in. Ultimately, I'd argue that it's favorable if you can simply rush drums and end a match quickly with him, but this carries its own risk and downsides, since your team might not be on the same page as you, so be sure to try both approaches when you practice Visage. Of last mention is his Shard. I wouldn't call it exactly mandatory on him, but it is extremely valuable all the same. You're able to hide in the ground much like your familiars and extend your longevity due to it. This can be used to cleverly stun people but also make them waste time on trying to kill you, only to reject them by solidifying yourself into the ground. I'd largely recommend that you pick it up after either drums or Aghanims, depending on which route you went item wise. Ah yes, the most fun part about Visage, and truly where he really shines in 735 too. Our playstyle with Visage, much like his item build, will depend entirely on which match we're in with him, either playing for a quick win or slowly dominating with the before mentioned Aghanims. That said, some things remain the same. To start the game off with, we want to be absolutely relentless with Soul Assumption at level 1 and going forward. The amount of damage this ability dishes out is unnatural, and with such a short cooldown tied to it as well, your odds of shredding opponents' health and getting early kills are fairly high. Doing damage with Soul Assumption is based on how much damage has been received by heroes in an area around Visage, so playing aggressively with your lane partner will generate the 3 charges you're looking for to spit out your Soul Assumption. Be sure to right click and apply an insane amount of pressure with your base damage and burst this way. Most of the laning stage will go this way. Whittle the enemy down with your right clicks and Soul Assumption and attempt to establish lane dominance this way. If you're in danger of getting killed, use Grave Chill as a method to debuff the enemy and run away. When you reach level 6 is where things goes completely off the rails, much like a hero such as Broodmother. With your familiars, you're now able to dive towers like there's no tomorrow, and apply a stupid amount of pressure. Try and shove the enemy out of lane entirely, and if the enemy's safe lane is still present and hugging the tower, make him regret this by diving him with birds and attempt to kill him. At best, you kill him for it, and at worst, you make people teleport to try and save him, only to be able to run away and create a stupid amount of space in the process. If you're able to make people forego the lane entirely, you can kill the tier 1 tower very quickly, before proceeding towards the tier 2 tower. Keep applying pressure to the lane, while also farming jungle camps very quickly with birds, then slowly edging into either your Death Push playstyle or your Aghanims one. If your team is in need of assistance, one of the best things you can do, assuming you're able to help them of course, is to port to a tower they're dying at, resummon your birds there and aid them, before turning a potential counter gank into a push. If that isn't possible, keep applying lane pressure and farm rigorously. If you went the Death Push route, start huddling up with your team and essentially push towers as either 4 without the position 1, or even as 5 including the position 1, depending on your composition. Fighting into Visage at this stage is insanely hard and almost an assured death sentence. If you went for Aghanims, start using it to your team's advantage and farm less. Use your flying invisibility to generate vision and map out potential places for ganks and cheeky tower pushes. You're an insane asset to the position 4 and 5 like this in particular. You can also use the birds to split push on their own away from Visage, but this requires a bit more micromanagement on your part. Not to mention that the birds are very susceptible to dying when not around Visage, because they aren't in possession of his Gravekeeper's cloak like this. Eventually, either style should move you towards getting all outer towers with ease, due to how insanely fast Visage actually pushes, regardless of build choice. If going high ground is too hard following this, Your only real choice is to try and achieve a kill somewhere before pushing for a tier 3, or picking up Roche Aegis, which Visage is really fast at too. At this point, it's all about slamming into tier 3 and barracks. If the enemy takes one bad engagement, especially without buyback, the game is simply over because Visage plus birds do too much damage to structures, and will win the game from 1-1 fight like this. If you don't win the game immediately from Aegis and potentially lose a fight, keep up the same pressure as before. Try and get a kill so you can fight the enemy 4v5 at barracks, or wait for an additional Aegis before you attempt ending the game. This should ultimately be enough for you to win. I'm well aware that Visage is far from one of the most played heroes in Dota 2, which is also what drove me to wanting to cover him. He's both seriously misunderstood but also gravely underrated. He's incredibly good at just about every stage of the game, and is a solid foundation to any team out there. You really can't go wrong with learning and picking him. If you've been wanting to practice a hero with a super high skill ceiling, and one that's arguably among the hardest of the cast to make use of, Visage comes insanely highly recommended at the moment. Learning him will not just grant you a powerful hero you can play in just about every meta, but will push you to become a better player in just about every aspect as a whole.